Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Jim O'Connor, and I'm Project Director at Advance Illinois. It is my pleasure to introduce this session and to moderate our panel today. I'm joined by Dr. Carmen Ayala, State Superintendent of Education. She was appointed by the State Board of Education effective 3 years ago. In fact, had a work anniversary this past Tuesday, so happy anniversary, Dr. Ayala. Prior to her arrival at ISB, Carmen had served as the Superintendent of Berwyn North School District 98 for 7 years. We'll also be joined by Dr. Devon Horton, who serves as the Superintendent of Evanston Skokie School District 65. He's had the role of the student, elementary school teacher, assistant principal, assistant superintendent, chief of schools, and now superintendent. I'm also joined by Dr. Garcia-Sanchez. After 27 years in education, school level coach, district level management positions, as well as school building and network leadership, Dr. Garcia-Sanchez left Chicago Public Schools to become the first female Latina superintendent of the DeKalb School District 428, July 1st of 2021. And before we start, special thanks to Jose Garcia on the Advance Illinois team, who's going to be running technology for this meeting, as well as Jackie Matthews, the Executive Director of Communications at the Illinois State Board of Education, who will be supporting our chat and answering questions also that you drop in the Q&A feature. The name of our presentation is, you can go to the next slide, Jose, is Illinois Equity Journey Continuum, implementing equity-focused efforts to support pre-K to 12 students. And talk a little bit about our agenda. You can go to the next slide. So our plan today is for Dr. Ayala to offer us an overview of ISB's Equity Journey Continuum, and then we'll pause for questions. So please be dropping questions into the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as we can then. Then Dr. Horton will talk about Evanston Skokie District 65's equity work and how it fits in with the Equity Journey Continuum. And then Dr. Garcia-Sanchez from DeKalb District 428 will talk about their own equity work and then how that fits in with the Equity Journey Continuum. And then finally, we'll have a moderated panel. I'll be moderating. Please drop in lots of questions. We'll get to as many as we can, and we'll finish with that. And I'll finish with a couple quick things at the very end, but we'll spend most of our time with this presentation at the front end, and then questions first from me and then from you all at the end. Without further ado, I want to turn things over to Dr. Ayala.
Good morning. Thank you, Jim. Oh, I'm so excited to present on the Equity Journey Continuum. You know, this is a new tool as part of our ISB strategic plan that we adopted in November of 2020. And in a nutshell, the tool will help districts view their data, but through the lens of equity. You know, districts are already required by state or federal laws to collect and report a very large amount of data to ISB. The goal of this tool is to make that data more useful for districts as they look to close gaps in achievement and improve outcomes for all of our students. Next slide, please. So equity is in the name of the tool, so it's clear that equity is what it's all about. Equity is prioritized throughout our ISB strategic plan, and it's defined as ensuring that our school system values students' individuality and provides them the specific supports they need to succeed. Now, I've seen throughout my career as a teacher, as an educational leader, and as a district superintendent that equity benefits all students because equity and diversity are not just about race. Even in school districts that mostly serve students from one particular background, there's still tremendous diversity. Each student has their own family dynamic, their own learning style, their own life goals, their own favorite subject. They may practice different religions or have different family income levels. They may have an IEP or be learning English. They may be struggling with mental or physical health concerns or experiencing challenges at home. A mindset of equity says that our policies, programs, and practices might need to change in order to recognize and affirm this diversity, so all these diverse students can reach high expectations. Data is the foundation of equity work. It's our data that shows us what students are underserved and where we need to focus in order to improve outcomes for all. At the state level, our data shows us that over the past few decades, there are groups of students who have historically not been served well by our school system. The Equity Journey Continuum will be an informational tool to illuminate areas where a district may need to alter systems, increase access, add resources, or seek supports to ensure students from all backgrounds can achieve the same high standards. Ultimately, creating a more equitable school culture is going to benefit all of our students. Equity is a journey, and the journey will be different for each and every district. It is also a process that begins where an entity is and continues to the destination of equity. The continuum is based on ISB's strategic plan and contains equity elements designed to guide districts in implementing equity as a part of the development of processes, systems, foundations, and culture. The Equity Journey Continuum is a tool to support this important conversation. It will show where each school district is on its equity journey based on a wide range of data. Districts will have access to a robust suite of data analysis, which is on the District Review and Verification Tool. We know it as the DRVT. And on October 22nd, a very pared down view of the Equity Journey Continuum will become part of the district profile on the Illinois report card. The Equity Journey Continuum was developed to assist districts in identifying areas where they can improve equity and access to opportunities, supports, and resources. So as I mentioned, students can reach high standards and be successful in college, careers, and/or employment. Each district's data reflects students' access to opportunities, supports, and resources. Districts can use this data to inform a process of system-level improvements and change. The Equity Journey Continuum is a tool to support this very important conversation. So where did we begin? The Illinois State Board of Education developed this tool by researching and referencing other experts and other states. The Education Commission of the states provided many examples, and our team drew inspiration from similar projects developed by state education agencies such as North Carolina and Pennsylvania. This process identified equity indicators, data elements, and metrics that are key parts of the Equity Journey Continuum. Next slide, please. The Equity Journey Continuum focuses on 3 areas, and these areas are aligned to our strategic plan: student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators. Each area includes a suite of data elements. These data elements are reliable measures already collected statewide. We ensured that at no point in the process would we be asking districts to collect or provide any new data. And these data points are also those that are within a district's control. The tool re-examines the data districts already collect and report through the lens of equity. Next slide. The continuum contains 4 steps, each divided into intervals. In each of the 3 areas of student learning, learning conditions, and elevating educators, districts will be able to see where they are along the 4 steps of the continuum. Step 1 indicates that there are large gaps. Step 4 will show that there are minimal gaps. At step 4, a district is establishing equity as part of its culture and in policies, practices, and programs that provide equitable access to supports, resources, and opportunities. The public-facing version of the continuum on the district report card will only show the 3 macro areas and the district step in these areas. Each district will also have space to enter narrative information telling their unique equity story. This will give the public just a snapshot of the district's equity journey. Next slide, please. Now, each of the three areas in the continuum are based on multiple data elements. In the data review and verification tool that only districts and not the public will have access to, districts will get to dive deeper to see where they land in each of the elements that make up each area. The continuum uses data from the 2018-19 school year, and this is to account for the disruptions in data due to the pandemic. The first area here is student learning, and this view is designed to help districts reflect on how effectively the district is achieving equity in student learning. The data we use measure equity includes kindergarten readiness, our state assessments like the IAR, SAT, the DLM and Access, the gaps that may exist among groups of 8th graders passing Algebra 1, 8th graders enrolled in Algebra 1, on-time graduation rates, and students enrolled in advanced placement courses. Next slide. The second focus area is learning conditions. Now, we can all agree that students deserve safe, healthy, and welcoming learning environments to meet the unique needs of students. And this view is designed to help students reflect on the This view is designed to help districts reflect on the lived experiences of the students by examining disciplinary rates, site-based per pupil expenditures, attendance, and those kinds of things. These are data elements that are interconnected, and when we look at them through the lens of equity, we can re-examine the supports that we would provide. If you can advance the next slide. And there we go. Now we're on elevating educators, which is our third area. And we want all of our Illinois students to have teachers who are both equipped and empowered to meet their educational needs. And that includes having teachers who reflect the diversity of the students they serve. This particular area uses data such as student demographic, teacher demographics, administrators, as well as teacher experience, education levels, and out-of-field teachers. Next slide, please. Now here's where we are with the development of the tool. As I mentioned, this has been adopted and in our strategic plan since November of 2020. All of the districts are previewing their Equity Journey Continuum now. They received that last week. Over the summer, we also had a pilot with selected school districts that represented all the different configurations, areas of the state to really have conversations about what they were thinking. And then in October, the Illinois report card, the district report card, will have the Equity Journey Continuum as the new component on the report card for each district. Overall, the Equity Continuum assists districts and their communities to make informed decisions about their district's equity strengths, their opportunities for growth, access and supports, and to speak effectively about where to invest their equity efforts and resources to ensure that all backgrounds, all students can achieve high standards as districts move forward on their own unique equity journey. Next slide. I just want to highlight here that there are already information and resources available to assist districts, and you can find them on our ISB Equity website. There is an email also available. We will be providing additional information and resources as they become available. And so lots of good information being presented to districts, and we will be sharing more information as we continue on this equity journey. So at this point, I will take in any questions that you might have about the Equity Journey Continuum. We're just rolling this out, and we'll be collecting feedback.
Encourage anybody to drop any questions in the Q&A. Maybe while we're waiting, one question I've got, Dr. Ayala, is can you just talk about what would success look like on the Equity Journey Continuum a year out, 2 years out, further out?
Well, You know, I have been on my own equity journey continuum my entire career. Jim, it's until every single student in the state of Illinois receives what he or she needs and is successful on the expectations that we have set, that's the destination.
Sounds right to me. Yeah, I really appreciate your hard work here and your team's hard work. This is really exciting that you're rolling out this really important effort, and I think it lines up well with our conference theme. Any other questions? We got one here. The question from Emily Ruska: how will this work be tied into and support work like the learning renewal initiatives being supported by One Goal?
I think that with every initiative, right, whether it's One Goal, whether it's high impact tutoring, whether it's transition from pre-K to K or from high school to post-secondary opportunities, the equity lens is something that we are always utilizing. We're always asking the question, who's not at the table? How is this program impacting our low-income students, our students who have IEPs, our students of color? And so equity work is within the fabric of everything that we do.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ayala, and thank you, Emily, for that question. I think we can turn to Dr. Horton, who's going to talk about the equity work that Evanston District 65 has taken on, and then also how the Equity Journey Continuum will likely impact that. So I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Horton.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ayala, for such an amazing and courageous efforts to right size fit our community, the state of Illinois, I should say, around equity journey. And something that you said that was really powerful before I dive into what we're doing here in 65 is that every district is at a different place. So there's no one size fits solution for each community, but there are some common pieces that will need to be addressed and supported as each of us are at different stages on this continuum. Next slide, please. All right, I just wanted to walk you through the journey. And on here, when you think about Evanston Skokie 65, you hear a lot about diversity and how our community is looked at as to be one of the more progressive equity-centered communities. And I wanted to just walk through the stages of this. And so the first area that I want to highlight is that this journey started back in 2016. And there's the racial and education equity statement that was done by the board. This was prior to my time. Then they did the PEP diversity series, right? Where they actually took the PTA and started to work on a plan back in 2016 to merge funds so that those funds could be put in one pot. And then the funds could be equally distributed across the district, which is huge. The annual achievement reports were first released in 2016. The racial equity education equity policy was done in 2017. We started here in the district, again, prior to me arriving, the Beyond Diversity workshops. And then there was district-wide Beyond Diversity, where anyone is hired in our district, they go through Beyond Diversity in the SEED training. Next slide, please. And then there was a Black Lives Matter curriculum that was launched in 2018. There was an executive director of Black Student Success position that was created. Again, I came here in 2020. This is the journey I wanted to share with you. And then there was the Early Childhood Education Task Force. The district was noticing that we were not getting the outcomes in the early childhood, and we had to make some shifts, and they made some major shifts, and they're paying off pretty nicely right now. We made the commitment to be anti-racist schools. Restorative practices was adopted as a district in 2019. There was the LGBTQ plus curriculum week that was launched in 2019. And in addition to that, we launched a district gender support team, where we bring in individuals who specialize in helping our district really focus and create policy and efforts to make it an all-inclusive community. There was a student resource office meeting that took place in a racial equity impact assessment that started then. There was a citywide effort around reading The White Fragility, doing a book study. where K-8 district and Evanston Township 202 all partnered with us, and they actually read the White Fragility. There's a book study, has some really rich discussions. The Latinx Heritage Curriculum Week was adopted in 2020. Next slide, please. And then we launched I'm going to talk a little bit about. When you're doing this equity work, it is important that you think about how to operate within a framework, because as it was mentioned earlier by our state superintendent, there are multiple layers to equity work. And so if you are targeting just race or special education, you're going to miss out on so many individuals who are impacted when we talk about intersectionality and the different layers of this. So we started our data reality checks, really looking at data through all levels and demographics and race. Sorry, camera. And then we have the social studies anti-racism curriculum development. So we are in the first year of our pilot. We wrote our entire social studies curriculum. It took a year, worked with a consultant and our team. And now we are in the first phase of releasing our all-inclusive history for social studies. We do these Westone observations. And what that means, we got to get in classrooms and not just look at to see if teachers are teaching, but supporting our teachers on their journey to being culturally responsive in their practices and how they're delivering it. And we launched our professional learning community cycle not as an option, but as an expectation for all of our schools. We did the intercultural development inventory assessment. It's best that you reflect as often as you can where you are as an individual on this equity journey. We launched our SPED co-teaching training this past year, in 2020. And then we adopted a framework by Scholastic, Dr. Karen Mapp. When we talk about engaging families, and depending on the community you serve, there are parents that you're going to hear a lot from. And then there are also some parents that you're never going to hear from. And so this MAP correct framework allows you to build an intentional plan at your school to reach those parents that you don't hear from a lot. And then we launched the emergent bilingual curriculum. We have been teaching two-way emergent for, I want to say 10 to 12 years, but for the first time, we actually adopted a curriculum, not just translating an English written math book or a reading book, but an actual curriculum, which has been really beneficial. Next slide. And then just some other pieces as you heard our state superintendent speak about policy, practice, and I would say policy, people, and practice. We had to get really intentional about how we're hiring. So we have partners with Golden Apple. We actually have a teacher residency program. We're in our first year. ISB put out a grant. We were awarded the grant. We are now training. Our first group will graduate in June. Educators with the focus on diverse educators. It's really a huge impact for us. There's some positive data coming out of that on how students are being impacted just from the process of training. The student assignment planning, which we're going through right now. There's been a 53-year issue in our community of eliminating the school in the 5th Ward where 95% of the people that live there are African American, and all of those students have been bused out of that community since 1967. Well, we found a way to creatively fund that, and I'll talk about that. We have our aspiring leaders, identifying educators who have the knack for it and the passion to lead through an equity lens. And we're addressing our structural deficit, which has caused resource issues in some levels on how we're going to create and beyond. Next slide, please. So create, you heard me speak about the teacher residency. This is a really powerful opportunity for us to identify individuals in the Evanston community that are interested in becoming educators, but didn't have a clear pathway or could not afford to quit their 9-to-5 to get their master's. And so this program, in partnership with Northwestern and National Louis University, we had originally 19 residents that were accepted into the program, and we're looking in June to graduate 13 of them. Of course, in this process to get a master's in 1 year, we pay them a stipend. They're either enrolled in Northwestern or National Louis, and Monday through Thursday, they're in one of our 2 magnet schools, training under some of our stronger teachers. And then on Fridays, they're taking their coursework with our intent to place them as educators in our district. We all know that the teacher shortage is a real thing, but why not take advantage of this and make sure that when we do replace the teachers, make sure that the equity center and its educators that we built for our community across the board. Next slide. The District 65 student assignment planning. I'm going to spend a little time here because again, we know Brown versus Board of Education, the intent behind it was strong and it was positive. The intent behind Brown versus Board was to resource and make sure that schools could actually be properly resourced. But the implementation in many ways, when we talk about redlining, was done with a lot of concerns. This is why we have communities like our Fifth Ward that don't have a neighborhood school. We know neighborhood schools are the heartbeat of communities. And since they implemented the busing piece back in 1967 in our district, there have been 4 different efforts to find ways to build a new school back in the community where 90%, 95% of our African-American families, well, the community is 95% African-American. Well, you know, in this industry, there are 2 main ways in which you can fund a new school. One is referendum, and the second way is through you can use your fund balance. But who has $30–40 million to spend out of their fund balance to build a new school? And legally, we must maintain 25% fund balance. And of course, the efforts for referendum, each time they apply for the referendum, it failed. Well, when you have an equity-centered school board, equity-centered administration, and an equity-centered bulk of our community, we found a third way. And I am happy to say that we are we're using something called an accelerated lease, where we're taking the systemic racist process of busing our students out of that Fifth Ward. And we pay $4 million a year in busing. But this process through accelerated lease allows us to take the 2.8 that we spend for the Fifth Ward and actually use that to pay back. We're going to sell bonds. We have a really good bond rating in our district. And we're going to sell we'll have $40 million loan. We'll be able to build that. And over 20 years, we'll pay back the loan, and we'll carve it out of the 2.8 million. So it's taking that same money and now paying for basically, I like to just summarize it for those who may not be too familiar with the referendum idea or as a bond piece, as a mortgage. That's the equity journey that we had to be on. Like when you think about the equity taxonomy, the first level is student integration, like our students properly placed in environments where they feel safe. We also have not done a student assignment redistricting piece since 1995. Policy, people, and practice, right? Policy requires us to do it every 5 years. We had not done that. And so now we are doing this process, and on the 14th, we'll be taking our full proposal to the board. It's a really historic moment for our community and for our students, well-deserved. And this was a Herculean effort from our school board for the journey that they've been on to this point, for our team and our educators, as well as our students. So next slide. And here are the priorities when you talk about the student assignment, and this is what came out. We formed a 40-member student assignment planning committee. We started this work last year, and so we did applications. Over 100 people applied to be on this committee. We landed with 40, and about 30 stayed with us for the full year. And the priorities became having an actual physical school that's walking distance for students, programmatic access available to walkable distance for schools. So what does that mean? We have students who may need EL services that have to get on a bus because their neighborhood school don't offer it. So we've now placed programs in every single one of our neighborhood schools. Our special education students also may not have a program in their community and they have to get on a bus, so we've placed them. And then there are boundaries that are allowed for walkable school experience, using data to resource appropriately based on student needs, and then ensuring a process that elevates historically marginalized. And this is how we have addressed that. All right, next slide. And we are really dancing around with a change management process. This process is important when you're making these gargantuan changes or even the lower level changes. You have to have a commitment to including people who are going to be affected by decisions that you make. I learned that working with the superintendent, with Mr. Culver in East St. Louis. You have to make sure that those people are involved. And so we had to build a process on how we are actually including those individuals, not just inviting them to participate if they want to, but being very intentional about that. Next slide. And this is just the ag car model. When you bring about awareness, your desire of who you want to have who you're going to have in the room and talk about why, the knowledge, how do you make the change, the ability, how do you empower the audience? Like this process for building that Fifth Ward school it didn't come from me, right? It came from our community, and that's equitable process. And then the reinforcement. Next slide. All right. And this is where I'll end, but this is our journey that we've been on, and just some high levels again. These are all actions that different pathways that we will take as educators in different districts. And the equity journey is, again, it's a continuum. So thank you. And without further ado, I want to pass it over to Dr. Garcia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Minerva Garcia-Sanchez. I'm the superintendent, proud superintendent of DeKalb 428. And welcome to this session. Thank you for having me. Next slide, please. Just in full transparency, this is my 8th month as superintendent. I'm very proud to be here, and I feel that there's a reason that I'm here, and I'm hoping that the work that I plan on doing and have been doing really aligns to the work that this district has already done. Their journey really started way before I came, but particularly in 2017, they drafted and began to work on a diversity plan. The purpose of the diversity plan was to make sure that they were being inclusive of what their new enrollment looked like. There's been a shift over the last 6 years on what the faces of DeKalb really look like. And as you can see, based on our enrollment, it's become more and more diverse. We also have a 65% low income. Our English learners are at 15% of our population, 16 with students with IEPs, and could be a combination of an English learner and a student with an IEP. And then our truancy, it says 26%, but I'm pretty sure we're a little lower than that, but let's just in full transparency. Next slide, please. So, and taking a look at what the diversity plan included, we wanted to make sure that we supported everyone. We identified some gaps within the diversity plan through a team that continued to look at it, and that is a social justice team. The district really has approximately 30 different teams that are made up of teachers, mid-level staff, and upper staff, and then local school board members to review and determine what next steps and how we can be more strategic on taking a look at what is happening currently in our district and where we want to be. So Dr. Horton went through very detailed information around what his district has been doing, what he continues to do. I'm sure all of you were saying, yeah, we do some of that stuff too. You know, we get that done too. But this is my perspective and my idea on how to make sure that we are being transparent with our community and we're making systemic change. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that we have all of our stakeholders involved. So as I mentioned, we have a number of committees in the district. And in addition to that, we've conducted some town hall meetings. Those town hall meetings, we've invited the community in to review what our strategies are, what our goals are for the district, and ask them for feedback. We've had a number of great strategies and comments contributed to that and have been now included in our strategic plan that we are in the processes of developing and implementing. So here we've identified the gaps. We wanted to make sure that we were listening to our families in our community. We wanted to make sure that our leaders and our staff who are on the ground level working with our students and our families, that they had input. And of course, we wanted to include student voice. And of course, I keep saying of course, we had data analysis. So we wanted to continue to make sure that we're looking at the data, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, and reflecting on what it is and what we need to do next to make sure that we are improving and staying the course. Next slide, please. So after having done that, we began to prioritize equity within what our strategic plan is and along these 4 areas: student achievement, community engagement and marketing, financial stability and the equity lens, and then human capital, recruitment, development, and retainment. So in general, this is what we've done. You can see the bullet points there, but MTSS, as we all know, is a way, a systemic way and a framework to be able to get to all of our students where they are be able to meet their needs on the academic and social emotional level, as you all know that. So I'm preaching to the choir here, but we wanted to make sure that I said that it's clear, because we believe that by taking a look at our students, again, quantitatively and qualitatively, that we are meeting their needs where they need to be and supporting them as a whole student. In addition to that, we wanted to make sure that we partnered with our community, because you always hear that old adage, it takes a village. Well, it really does take a village. And the village includes every person that touches the life of a child. And so we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive of having our partners that service families, that our teachers are well prepared and supported, that our building administrators have the resources to provide their staff and their families with what they need. And then of course that the district is then able to support all of this and helping the strategy continue to move forward. We're still in a building process of some of these things and building the strategies so that we are systemically covering all of our students and supporting them where they need to be. Then of course, our financial stability. It's great that we have additional funds to be able to close those gaps. We need the funding, not just to close the digital divide and making sure that all of our families have equitable access to resources via a hotspot or whatever the student needs in order to be there, making sure that everybody has Chromebooks and that the resources at the classroom level are there for all of our students. But making sure, also ensuring that all of our, that our district as a whole has the space that it needs so that we can lower classroom sizes. And then the only thing would be then is that we need to be able to find the space, right? And that's usually something that will support that our students get to where they need. And eventually developing neighborhood schools so that our students can walk to school and instead of having to ride a bus. Not that buses aren't great, but this the beginning of this year was really tough on all of us. And making sure that our students got to school was a little bit of a drive to get to. And we want to make sure that our students can get to school no matter what. So we're looking forward to being able to support a strategy that will get us there. So I believe Dr. Horton is in the midst of doing that or has been working really hard on making sure that the schools are walkable. And so we want to make sure that we want to do the same thing. So we might borrow some of his strategies in that. And then finally, the human capital component of it. To be honest with you, I'm looking for somebody that when I'm ready to leave this spot, when I'm ready to retire, that somebody from within is going to be able to take the spot on, right? We want to be able to build our own folks so that as we're learning and building what these strategies look like, that our folks know what they are, and then it's an easy transition on to taking another step. And as folks come in from other areas of the state or the country to come work with us, which we're happy to receive, I got lots of vacancies. We are, we want to make sure that there is a training component and that they can learn what it means to be a DeKalb staff member, a DeKalb teacher, or somebody who is an administrative role. And all of those things are something that we're currently building, and we will continue to build out to support our staff and our families. Next slide, please. So in full transparency, I wanted to share what our data looked like at this time. And I think that it's obvious to me and obvious to you that there's some things that we needed to work on. So this is our 2018-19 data and around student achievement. And although that we see that there are some things that are on that verge of 2.0, the number is something that I would question. I want to make sure that I understand what each one of those numbers actually means for me and how we can adapt and change that for our district. But more importantly, it looks like that there's some work that we have to do and people need to know this. So my staff eventually will be able to take a look at that when it's comparable data to where we currently are now versus where we were before. And then how do we change that and adapt what we need to do to make it better? So in this instance, I believe that our student achievement goals around MTSS and supporting the whole child will help us to get there, but also ensuring that our curriculum and instruction is on par, that we have sound practices in our school and that we're inclusive so that children see themselves in the curriculum. And we have some strategies now that are able to do that and others that we're still building out. Next slide. Again, this is student achievement. And again, we have places that we need to take a look at and making sure that we are moving forward. All of these areas are part of our strategic plan, and taking a look again where we need to grow is definite. I think that there's some places that we really are missing and lacking, and places that we have some questions where we need to clean up. Next slide. Again, here, the community engagement and marketing piece. We do engage, it looks like we were engaging our families previously, that there are some places that we need to continue to grow, but it appears that we are making good strides. And I believe that if we were to compare to what we are now, I think that there would be quite a difference here. But again, there's some places that are obvious to us and obvious to you now that we need to change. But our second goal around our community engagement and marketing line up to where we are in these gaps. Next slide, please. So financial stability with the equity lens and the human capital recruitment development component. It looks like we are well on our way to equity. I think I question this only a little bit because I feel like there's a lot of tweaking that we still have to do. I'm not trying to be a perfectionist, there's no reason to try to do that, but we need to be able to grow in those smaller gaps to really solidify and make sure that the practices are embedded and that everybody knows what they are. And I think that that's a great place for us to grow. Next slide, please. I'm sorry. So that, so that's where we are right now. And again, I'm just going to say that transparency and changing our systems are where we are now. And I welcome any and everyone to be able to give me some feedback. Thank you so much. So handing it over back to Jim, our moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia-Sanchez. I appreciate that presentation, and thank you, Dr. Horton, as well. So I'm going to open up to questions from the audience. So I'll start with a couple myself, but I encourage anybody who's joined us today to put your questions into the Q&A feature. And I'll start with a couple questions. So Dr. Ayala, as a former school board member myself, I think about having this data and how it would have been helpful back when I was a school board member. Can you talk about the types of conversations you hope that the Equity Journey Continuum will elicit at the district level? And what are the types of district policies that you hope this tool will help inform?
Great question, Jim. I think we just saw two examples of how the Equity Journey Continuum could be used. And I really loved how DeKalb took some of the Equity Journey elements that they were showing and saw how it aligned to their own strategic plan. So I think that that's something, a great example that we saw even this morning. My goodness, and we didn't even plan any of this. So I'm just really, really excited. I think that one of the things that the Equity Journey Continuum does, we've known about these gaps for years. We can go back 5, 10 plus years, and we see that the gaps haven't really moved very much. But I think what we haven't done is really take a look at all of the data through the equity lens. So if you're a district and you have achievement gaps between groups of students, and you have discipline disparity between groups of students, and you have some staffing data, all of that begins to really pull together a story for the district. The reason why we're looking at this at a district level, I get asked that question a lot, why not do this for schools? We're doing it with the district because that's where systemic change occurs. And schools need the support at the district level, at the school board level, at the community level to really begin to close those gaps. And so those are the conversations that I am just so overjoyed that, Dr. Horton and Dr. Garcia-Sanchez, that your leadership in your districts, you're engaging in those conversations and really having an impact.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ayala. So I want to turn to Dr. Horton. If you could talk a little bit more about what Dr. Ayala just talked about and that tool. As you look at the Equity Journey tool and the results for Evanston 65, what information lined up with sort of what you felt like you sort of knew? And then also what data surprised you, and how do you think you'll use the tool in your district, given the substantial work that you've already done?
Yeah, I think, as Dr. Garcia laid out, Dr. Garcia-Sanchez, we have a framework. I didn't get a chance to present it because, time is tight. Looking at the Equity Journey Continuum, I feel like it put us in a really good spot because it validated some things for us around what we were prioritizing as a district, and to see the state lay that out as a priority really helped us substantially. I do agree with Dr. Garcia-Sanchez too around that third area around elevating educators. I want to look at that a little deeper. We know that the teacher evaluation piece, it's important, but there's some other elements when you align how students are achieving and performing. So we have something called the Miracles Framework, and this Miracles Framework, it's our district improvement plan that's centered on equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And we have it's 8 tenets. It's motion towards equity, which is the first one. We have the improved instructional core, the relevant and rigorous course of study. And under each, I can go through all of them. And we have a commitment to accountability, sustainable funding. Under each one of those, we have these tenets that really pull out many of the elements that comes from the equity continuum journey, which is like, it's like a touchdown for us. I feel very I guess validated, but also happy and excited to see that the state and other districts are all dealing with some of the same challenges that we are. So that's how we, I would say, again, kudos to the ISB and to our state superintendent for making such a commitment. You don't find this in many other states that have really taken this as a priority. So our district is just excited to not be looking to be like this unicorn in his work. And so it's really awesome.
Yeah, I know I can relate, Dr. Horton. When the state stepped in at various times and made tough decisions that we could as a district move even further on, that was really helpful. So it's helpful to hear you say that again, given the substantial work that your district has done over time. It's helpful to hear that it's even helpful for your district. All right, Dr. Garcia, sort of the same question for you. As you looked at the tool, looked at the tool in DeKalb, what lined up with what you already knew and what data surprised you? And how do you think you're going to use it, given that you've already got a strategic plan in place?
So as we're building out a strategic plan, obviously, we've looked at a number of data points. We did take a look at our, interactive report card and use that data. But more importantly, when this data came out, it really just fortified what we'd already thought, right? So it really just made a deep connection for us. And we said, yeah, hey, ISB saying we're also on the same track that we need to be, right? And so it was really good for me. I think that one of the pieces that we're really excited about is obviously our English learners. Our English learners are making great strides, and it shows them this year. So hopefully when our data comes out this year, it'll be the same thing, and we're really rocking it that way. I think that math is an area, and maybe that's not our district. I know other districts, and the one that I came from that was really struggling with mathematics. And I think that this really also shows that, and it really pinpoints it for us. So we'll be concentrating, although our strategic plan already is lined up to that, it just, again, validates the fact that we really do need to do more there, especially with our students who are being able to take algebra, and that they are then, that it's more diverse. And so it's not just a group of students, but every child should be able to have access to algebra. And we should be able to do that by the time our children matriculate through all of our grades and end up in 8th grade. So that's the goal. I think that an area that we struggle with, and I'm sure others do too, is conduct. And some of the things that I think that we take a look at is that, what does conduct really mean? And, people use the word discipline, and, we use negative consequences sometimes to put children out of classrooms because they may have issues. Now, Dr. Ayala at the very beginning spoke about, the child comes with, right? So the child doesn't come beautiful from home, and and then at school they fall apart or whatever. I'm not trying to belittle it, but there's every child, every adult, every person walks into a room with a bunch of baggage, good baggage, bad baggage, whatever it is, and we have to take that person as they arrive, right? And so we can't just say, oh, like, leave that at the door. You can't do that, because it's mental, it's physical, it's in their heart. And we as school leaders and as individuals have to make sure that we understand what that child needs and how we can support them. And when you have 28, 32 kids in a classroom, it's a little bit difficult. So we need to make sure that we're growing, not just the understanding of what that looks like, but also what our adults are believing about that. And this data really kind of brought it out for me even further. And so that's something that we need to address, along with our our children not coming to school? Where are they? And, and why aren't they coming? And how do we make sure that the connection is there so that we're supporting the whole child, right? And then of course, the diversity of our staff. So it gives us high grades there, but I know that looking at our staff now, as great as they are, as hardworking as they are, as loyal as they are, our children need to be able to see people that look like them, right? And so that they can say, hey, I have a role model. I'm not saying that people that don't look like them can't be role models. I'm just saying that it adds to that SEL component for children to be able to say, hey, that teacher has the same kind of name that I have. That teacher represents my family or understands my cultural identity. And those things can be learned. And we want to make sure that our staff learns that, but it's an added need for our students to be able to see people that look like them there. And so I think that there's just a few tweaks that we need to do there to make that really stand out. And then of course, at the leadership role, making sure that our leaders really believe in the cultural relevance and the aspects that children bring with them when they come, so that resources and support systems are interwoven into the fabric of what a school is and what the school day is for our kids. So having looked at the data the way that we did just kind of the last couple of days has really made me want to focus even further on those things that we believed already were imperative in making changes in the district.
Really impressive, Dr. Garcia-Sanchez. Thank you for sharing that. And also for being so honest about sort of like where your district is and the struggles that you have. So I'd love to get any questions from the audience. Encourage anybody who's got a question, please drop it in the Q&A feature. But this is maybe a question for everybody. One of the features of the 6525 network is that we have a really diverse group of folks on our call today. So we've got perhaps a couple of district staff, but then many folks in the faith community, maybe community foundation staff, local advocates, teachers, social workers, school counselors, folks from higher ed, folks from the early learning community. What advice do you have for local advocates? What can they do to best support their districts moving forward on their equity journey? Do you have any advice for them? And this is really to each of you, I guess, whoever wants to take it first.
I mean, I can step in. I would say one of the most important pieces is if you're not a part of the actual district, but in the community, is holding us accountable. Accountability it takes many forms. And I think when you are looking at changing outcomes for students who've been marginalized on this journey forever, having community members for every corner that you turn, when individuals are making policy at the board level, when administration are making decisions around hiring and also some of the practices, be a voice in that room. Make sure that, as Dr. Garcia-Sanchez spoke about, making sure that there's an opportunity for those voices to be heard. And then also look internally at your organization to be sure that those priorities are similar and the same and aligned with, if we're looking at the equity continuum journey, and we're talking about our staffing, and we're looking at how we are engaging and looking for outcomes, internalize that for your organization and look for some alignment there, if this is a true desire of that respective community partner. So those are, I think, that accountability and being that thought partner with the district is really where you can get a lot of bang for your buck on improving outcomes under these conditions.
I'd like to add something to that, right? So I know social media is so prevalent out there, and I wish that social media was both positive as well as negative. And by that I mean, it's sometimes really easy to point out something that is not happening. But I wonder often, I don't mind hearing what's not working, right? I get it. I want to know what that is. But I also would like to know, how can we make that better? Like, do you have a suggestion? Is there a recommendation you can make? Join one of our committees, come and reach out to me. My people reach out all the time. I try to respond as quickly as possible and, directly to each individual. But I really need to know what that is, because the district doesn't belong to me. It's not mine. I work for the constituents. I work for the community. You send your kids to me and to our district. It's ours. It's all of ours. So when you shine, when you help us shine, you shine. right? I want this to be the North Star. So I need everybody to be on par to be able to help us. And yeah, it might be tough to hear some of these things, but it's much better if you come at us with, so I noticed this, but how about if we tried this? Or can we learn to be able to listen to it? If I think that really would make a difference for me. I just want to know what it is that folks really want and what they value, so that our core values will align and the district really belongs to the community.
What I would add to that, first of all, I want to just congratulate Dr. Horton and Dr. Garcia-Sanchez for their participation this morning and what they've shared, and the success that they are having on their equity journey. And you know, to answer your question, Jim, one of the strong tenets of equity work is how inclusive are we? How do we collaborate? How do we engage? It isn't a one size fits all. Every single district across the state is going to be at a different point in their equity journey based upon their community context, the relationships. And I think that how advocates and funders and colleges and all of the partners that could be made available really have to keep that in mind. Learn about which districts your organization, you know, each organization has a mission and a purpose and all of that, you know, which districts fit with that you can support and you can help and be a partner, as you know, Horton mentioned, be a thought partner, be a person that can really help think through some of those real challenging opportunities that come up. And I think that using this approach of being very inclusive and collaborating and working through together as a community is what is really going to have the impact that we need to have to make sure every student has what they need to reach those academic standards that we've set before them.
Awesome. Thank you all for those great pieces of advice. I want to just thank you, Dr. Ayala, for your leadership here, Dr. Horton, Dr. Garcia-Sanchez for joining us today and for these presentations and discussion. But again, just really more importantly, thank you for leading your districts in our state with such a strong focus on equity. I think it's really courageous and impressive work, and I'm really leaving this presentation really invigorated. So thank you. Just a quick note to those of you who've joined us today. What's up next at the 60 by 25 conference? We've got 3 breakouts at 10:30, one on high school youth apprenticeships, another on integrating social emotional learning into academic performance tasks, and then finally a session on re-envisioning higher education funding. And I encourage you to come back to those. They start in about 30 minutes. And then also our plenary at noon is focused on building currency for teacher pathways. Those are pathways that work at the high school level, helping students connect to community colleges and 4-year programs to become a teacher. So it really connects well with you know, what Dr. Horton laid out today and how important it is to diversify our staff, as Dr. Garcia-Sanchez said. So hopefully you can come back to that at noon. And then finally, our closing is at 1:15. So hope to see you at one of those sessions. And finally, please complete the survey. You can see it on the app or watch it in a follow-up email. Again, thank you all for joining today. Thank you to our presenters, and wish everybody the best of luck in your continued work on this equity journey. Thank you.